Hello, ASIC Lowlanders, and welcome to the Cosmere Quest, the series where we're going to explore every corner of Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere RPG and how his epic fantasy series has been adapted into tabletop form. From character creation and world building to magic systems and combat, we're here to help you bring the Cosmere to life at your table. I'm Sheridan.
I'm Nath. That's Rock.
That's Rock. And today we're going to talk about how combat actually plays out in the Cosmere RPG. This is a big topic, so we're going to be stripping it back to the basics. Things like turn order and structure, as well as some Cosmere-specific quirks on how combat works. We're going to tackle things like radiant powers, investiture, and character-specific combos in separate videos. For this one, we're really wanting to handle the fundamentals of how combat has been brought into this TTRPG.
Yeah, previously on the channel, I did a deep dive into combat actions. You can check that out in a link up here or down there or wherever it might be. That one is sort of on a more granular level. I go really specifically into every single action, reaction, and free action. Today, we're going to be looking more broadly. We're going to look at the bigger picture of how the Cosmere RPG feels to run and play.
Yeah. So I think if you're new here, obviously check out those videos and any of our earlier videos. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification bell for all the content that's going to be coming up, so you don't miss out on what's coming next.
This boy's drooling. Love it.
Now, before we go down the road on how combat works in the Cosmere RPG specifically, I wanted to quickly touch on what a TTRPG really briefly is, especially for the Cosmere fans who are probably watching, who might be newer to role-playing games. My one-liner is that for TTRPGs, each player takes on the role of a character in a shared world, and that world is guided by your game master or your GM. The GM sets the scene, and they really lay out the journey or the quest that the players are going to go on. From there, basically, it's a collaborative storytelling game, which is a large part of it, or the biggest part of it. And players describe what their characters want to do, and the GM, through rules and dice rolls, kind of helps narrate that story, and I guess determines how successful or unsuccessful your character is at doing what they want to do. Now, combat in a TTRPG is kind of like separate to the storytelling. It does have storytelling elements to it, obviously, it all does, but it's kind of, for me, the part of gameplay where it shifts gears. It gets a lot more structured, a lot more dramatic, get my words right today. But if you were to give me your one-liner, what would your one-liner be on just generally what combat is in a TTRPG?
It's a hell of a one-liner. Chad?
Yeah, it's definitely not one line.
Look, generally, it depends on the TTRPG, but generally speaking, combat is almost a different genre of game. You are looking at more of a turn-based, almost board game-like at times. You can play the Cosmere RPG and other TTRPGs theatre of mind, which just means you're playing by description, and you don't actually have anything on the table. We like to play with the grid. A lot of tables, I'd say most tables, like to play with the grid these days, where you have minis out on the table that represent your character and where they are in the battlefield. You can move those around on your turn, and the game master can move the minis around for the enemies and the NPCs. In this situation, essentially, you go from playing
Mm-hmm.
narratively until, let's say, you kick down a big door and on the other side there's an orc there, I guess, or a
chasm fiend.
Behind the door there's a chasm fiend.
Door,
Nailed it. Yep, perfect. And then you transition into the combat phase. Yeah,
I think that pretty much sums it up for anyone that's new. We're going to dive into some of the specifics of combat in the Cosmere RPG. Obviously, that's what we're going to do for this entire chat. I wanted to start out, though, with just touching on the die that are used in the Cosmere. I know that it's going to be pretty similar. It takes a lot of die mechanics from other games that you'd be pretty familiar with, but I specifically wanted to touch on die, and especially the plot die. I'm hoping you can talk about.
Yeah. Dice, plural.
Dice.
Die, singular, plot die. Yeah, that's right. Plot die is correct. Okay. It's a D20 based system, so a lot of people might be familiar with that. Dungeons and Dragons is a D20 based system, and there's a few of them out there. So in a lot of ways, it's similar to a lot of other games. As far as the dice that you need to run the game, it's a pretty standard array of dice. So you have a D4, a D6, a D8, a D10, only one of them in this game, and a D12. And then the Cosmere RPG, like you said, has the plot die, which is a unique D6. So it has two faces that have a positive icon that stands for an opportunity that can happen, and we'll get into that later. And then there's two faces that stand for a complication. Man, that word slips my mind. Not a complication. And then there's two blank faces. So sometimes that comes into play as well. So.
Yeah, I think the plot die is a really interesting one. I don't know. Sorry, I was trying to also think of complication. So this one is the one where Brandon Sanderson in his Cosmere RPG, he calls this the die that like raises the stakes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a mechanic actually called raise the stakes. Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
So what do the complications and the opportunities actually do for the dice rolls?
Yeah. So the way that it works is that there are some things that you can spend the opportunity on as a player, and it is sort of worded that way because there is another way to get an opportunity, and that would be rolling a natural 20 on the D20. So a lot of games that would be a critical hit, and that is one of the options. So I would say the first one that comes to mind for me for opportunities is that whenever you roll an opportunity, you can use that as a critical hit. In this game, a critical hit just means that you're maximizing the damage on the damage die. And that is an option either from rolling a 20 or, like you said, if there is a moment where it's sort of a significant part of the combat, or in the rest of the game it can be used as well. You can choose to use an opportunity in that way. But there are other ones as well. So you can aid an ally, which is a big one. Aiding an ally means that when you roll an opportunity, you can sort of choose a friend in the party that you want to give advantage to, and we'll get into exactly what advantage means in this game soon, but you can give advantage to a sort of a friendly ally, which is really, really a cool way to sort of promote collaborative play, and not just sort of min-maxing your own character and playing that way. You can also collect yourself. Collecting yourself is where you just give yourself a focus. Do you want to touch on focus now, or?
It's up to you.
Yeah, let's touch on focus. So, I'll do all four of these, and then we'll talk about focus. Focus is, just really briefly, it's a resource that all characters have in the Cosmere RPG that you use for some more complex or complicated moves. We'll come back to it really shortly. And then the final option that you can do whenever you roll an opportunity on either a 20 on the D20, like we said, or on the plot die, is that you can influence the narrative. And this is, I would say, the most interesting of them. This is a bit like an opportunity for a player to change the game in a way. So normally the player's way of interacting with the game is to have their character do things. But you can sort of influence a little bit of what happens, maybe even outside of the standard rules slightly, which would normally be the GM's domain. An example of this. So let's say you are rolling an attack test on someone, and you roll low on your D20, and you're going to miss the person that you're attacking, but you roll an opportunity on the plot die. You can suggest to the DM that maybe based off where you're fighting, maybe you're fighting on some rough terrain with rocks everywhere, that although you miss with your attack, that the enemy in trying to dodge your attack has slipped over and fallen over. So you can suggest something like that, and that would then, as long as you and your GM agree on that as a reasonable effect, then that is something that actually sort of literally influences the narrative, which I think is really cool. Now, on the flip side, when you roll a complication on this die, it's almost the opposite in what can happen. So we talked about aid an ally. There is also hinder an ally. That would be where the GM can give disadvantage to someone that's around you. An example of that would be that you're trying to attack an enemy, and whether you succeed or not, you roll a complication. The GM might say that the way that you're attacking has sort of taken you out of line, and you are distracted a friend while they're getting ready to fight. So their next attack is good. Yeah. So that's one option. You can also lose a focus. Becoming distracted is an option where you lose a focus, which is just an easy option for the GM. If there's nothing else and you don't want to slow the game down, the GM can say, look, yeah, you're sort of become distracted by what's happened and you lose a focus. That's an easy option. And then there's also the same influence the narrative option. This time with the GM in the hot seat, they can choose sort of what happens, a relevant outcome of what's happened, and that just lets them, I guess give it back to you as well. So there's some really good.
Nice GM.
Yeah, maybe, or hope that you don't go too hard on your influencing the narratives.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about complications that we haven't touched on just yet is that, unlike the opportunity side of the die, the complication side of the die, they come with, so there's two complication sides. It's a 2 or a 4. It has a 2 or a 4 with your complication.
Yeah, inside the image is a little number. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what those
Sure
do?
Can. So when I first read about the plot die, my first thought was you're introducing a die that has a 2 in 6 chance of adding something positive, or a 2 in 6 chance of adding something potentially negative, which seems a little outweighed. They've countered that by adding a 2 or a 4 on those sides, which gets added to your test roll. So in everything that you try to do in the game, you need to roll a test, essentially. That could be attacking, or it could be trying to influence someone in a conversation, or whatever it might be. You have a target number you're trying to get to, and you are rolling a d20 for the test. If you roll a complication because of the plot die, it will actually add 2 or 4 to that roll, making it more likely that you're going to succeed in the test, which I guess, yes, a complication could happen, but it's at least there's sort of raises the chance of there being a positive outcome as well.
Yeah, I think that pretty much covers it for the plot die. So we've got the complications, the opportunities, and the fact that there's an actual plot die that the GM can get you to roll at any moment where they feel it's significant to influence the story, right? But also the fact that a nat 1 or a nat 20 can essentially give you the effects of either a complication or an opportunity as well. I think that's really interesting to me. I love the plot die. It's one of my favorite parts.
If you've backed the higher tiers on the Kickstarter, yeah, I can speak. If you back the higher tiers on the Kickstarter, you'll get the physical versions of the die, but you don't need them. You can just use a regular D20 from your Dungeons & Dragons game or whatever, and you can also just use a regular D6. Count a 5 or a 6 as a opportunity, and count a 1 and a 2 as a complication.
Yeah. Before we move on, I know that there are some other really niche times that the plot die can be used and how it gets used. For example, with ranged attacks.
Yeah, so normally the plot die is something that is sort of introduced in a big moment, like we mentioned, but there are some rules that specifically outline that it gets used in this time. So I think the funniest or best example of that would be if you're using a ranged attack, you might be throwing a knife or using a bow and arrow, trying to shoot an enemy that's at a distance. If there is a friend of yours next to that enemy, automatically you add the plot die to the roll. In that case, if you miss the enemy with your attack test, I'm going to get used to saying test eventually. If you miss the enemy with your attack test, and you also roll a complication on the plot die, then the GM can say that you have shot your friend, essentially, and it would count as grazing them. We'll get into grazing a little bit later, but it means essentially that the damage die will apply to that ally instead of the enemy. They don't take any of the modifiers or anything, but the full damage from what you roll on the damage die, which I think is great. I think it's something that a lot of people homebrew in D&D, certain ways of doing that, and sometimes it can feel bad if a DM tries to pull that on you, but this is written into the rules. I don't think I think it's a really clean rule and it's fun. So
I love that the plot die has a mechanic where it also introduces grazing, because those two have been some of my favorite parts.
Yeah.
We'll get into the grazing in a second, or grazers in a second. All right, so that's really it for the die. We've settled that. I think the next thing that we really want to tackle is the order of combat, because Brando's Cosmere RPG, it has kind of shifted and changed the way that a lot of other TTRPGs do order of combat. And I think it's really interesting. So I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about the rounds and turns, the phases and how the phases work. And then hopefully at the end we can touch on surprise as well if we don't forget.
Yeah, I'll likely forget. But hey,
I'll remind
me. Okay, so yeah, I think of combat normally with the iconic roll initiative being at the start. This game doesn't have initiative. I'm going to have to think of a different phrase to use, I guess. Normally you would roll initiative. Everyone would be rolling die to work out the exact order that people are going in. So that can then be sort of laid out and you're going to follow that every round. In this game, players get to choose whether they want to have a fast turn or a slow turn. So there are phases like we mentioned. I'll go through those now. So the first phase is always the players first, which is, I think it's really cool. It feels good for the players. They're heroes, I guess, in the story, so they get to go first. If you take a fast turn, the idea is that you're going to get less to do on your turn, but you'll get to act first. So phase 1, you would get the players choose if they want to do a fast turn, they only get 2 actions. I say only because you will get 3 actions on a slow turn. So first you have that. Second phase is where the GM gets to move any enemies or friendly NPCs, just any NPCs that wish to go fast in the combat as well. And then phase 3 is the players that would like to have a slow turn. So this is players that maybe want to do something more, something bigger or more impactful on their turn, or they aren't as rushed about needing to get into combat, for example. They will get 3 actions on their turn. And then finally, phase 4, you get the NPCs. Once again, they get to have their slow turn that comes afterwards.
So 4 phases, fast, so fast player, fast monsters. Slow player,
wow.
Slow.
Can't confused monsters. No, go on.
So 4 phases. I think that's really good. So and the important takeaway really is that you can act fast, but you have less actions, or you can go slow and have more actions.
Yeah, and you can change it every turn as well. And that might sound like it's going to add more time. I found that it hasn't, although we haven't played a whole lot just yet. Really, the GM is just saying who wants to have a fast turn, or players that want to have a fast turn go. There is no turn order amongst the players either. So anyone that chooses to have a fast turn, they can go at the same time. And there are even, I don't know that you've even seen this come up yet, but there are some interesting mechanics with singers, for example, having war pairs where they can do turns that work together. So that there's some really cool stuff. So that is, they get to go in whatever order. Maybe one turn, it's more important for one player to go. The next turn is more important for the other. And you can change whether you're fast or slow every turn.
Yeah, I like the phases a lot. And for the Cosmere fans out there, like me, and I know you are too, but
just a lot.
It made me really happy that a round in combat in this Cosmere RPG, if we're putting it to a time frame, it is 10 heartbeats. 10 heartbeats is a round, so that's going to have some immediate implications.
Yeah. Your Dungeons and Dragons fans in the audience will be used to 6 seconds, which is boring and normal. 10 heartbeats is cool. They do mention in the book that if you specifically have a clock, something that relies on time, as something that's going to happen in X amount of seconds, you can count it as 10 seconds. But I think thematically it's really cool that it's 10 heartbeats.
Yeah, it is. It is very cool. And last, the only other thing that can really, that I've seen that really impacts turn order and the phases is surprise. So can you walk us through a little bit how surprise in this RPG impacts order of combat?
Yeah. So a surprise is just talking about any time that you get ambushed, that sort of thing. So maybe your players are waiting for some people to come past on horses and they're going to jump out and attack them, or the opposite, it can come the other way as well. When there is surprise, it affects just the first round of combat, and it means that whichever side is being surprised, they have 3 things that happen to them. So they have, first of all, you can't take a fast turn, so you have to take a slow turn, which means the other side is always going to get to go first. Mm-hmm. You get 1 less action, so you're taking a slow turn, but instead of getting 3 actions, you're still only getting 2. And you don't get a reaction, not just before your turn, because normally you get a reaction from the start of the combat, and then at the start of each turn, you get your reaction back. A reaction is something that you can do anytime during the round. So normally you would be able to do it even when it's not your turn. If you're being surprised, you don't get a reaction until your second turn. So it can, put you back. But then from there on, it just runs as normal.
Excellent. I mean, I think that's everything for Order of Combat summed up. If you guys think that we've missed anything, comment. We're happy to go back and try cover it for you. But those were our big takeaways. Now, this next couple of sections, we're going to go through actions and reactions pretty quickly because, as we said, you've already done a video going into the nitty-gritty of all the combat actions that you can do. And we're also going to go through attacking. I just want to give a little bit of a heads up that these sections that we're going to talk to is what all players, regardless of what you can build, can do in a combat. So whether or not you've decided to go Radiant or not, depending on the path you take, you're going to get extra things that are going to make it more flavory. It's going to be spicy in combat. You can do cool stuff. There's definitely cool stuff you can do. But what we're walking through here is the actions that everybody can do, regardless of if you've built into a certain path or not.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So quickly touching on this, actions and reactions. Can you give us a couple of examples? We know there's 3 types. There's actions, free actions, and reactions. Can you just give us a couple of examples of what those might be in the combat?
Yeah. So, I mean, we touched on attacking. That is an action, but we're going to get to that more in a second. So let's not worry about that right now. The one that is interesting in this game is that move is an action. So you'll notice you get 3 actions on a slow turn. That includes your movement. You can take some actions multiple times in a turn. Move is one of those. So you could actually take the move action 2 or 3 times in a turn if you want to move really far. There are also actions like brace that lets you sort of hide behind cover, and just there's a whole variety of actions that you can take to sort of. There's an option to recover as an action, which we said we were going to talk more about focus. Might as well talk about it now. Recover lets you roll a recovery die, which is based off your willpower attribute. The recovery die can be used to either gain health back in combat or to gain focus back in combat. Focus is one of the 2 resources that a character can get. We're only really going to be talking about focus today. The other resource that characters can get is investiture. In this game, specifically at the start with the Stormlight side of it, that's going to represent your amount of Stormlight that your character has. And it will be used for lashings and whatever other kind of surge binding you want to do. We'll get more to that in following videos, but with focus, the average amount of focus that a new character has is between 4 and 6. Which means that there's a few different things you can do with that focus to spend during combat, and you can also recover as an action to get it back. There's a couple of ideas of actions, I guess. You also have free actions. Free actions, there's only a couple of them that are sort of the basic ones, and that would be to drop an item or to sort of speak or banter between other characters. So you can say a few lines. Maybe you want to tell your friends to run or to target a certain enemy. That's a free action. You can do as many of those as you want a turn, to a limit usually of 1 each of them. And there are other free actions as well. And then reactions, like we mentioned, they're things that get used during anyone else's turn or any time of the round, so long as there's like a trigger for it. So each different reaction has a different trigger as to why you could use it. An example of one of those would be reactive strikes, which people that have played Dungeons & Dragons would know as an attack of opportunity, which is when an enemy is within your attack range and then they move out of your attack range. You can use your reaction to attack them. In this game, reactive strikes cost a focus. So that's something to keep in mind, that resource does come into play with a fair few of the actions in the game. Reactive strike, I think that's a great thing. Personally, I think that attacks of opportunity in Dungeons & Dragons cause all the players to get together to fight and then never move again because they don't want to move apart from each other. This sort of makes people have to make a choice. Do I want to stop the person from moving? If I do, it's going to stop me from using as many different cool actions that I can do. Cool.
We'll move straight on to attacking. This is a chunky bit of the piece for combat, obviously, is attacking someone. Relatively
familiar for experienced players, but yeah, for newbies, it's still not too bad, but we can get through it. Yeah.
The concept of attacking is pretty familiar, I feel like.
Yeah, well,
for anyone who's played a game.
Yeah.
So I think we'll if we could, I'd like to start with the strike action. That's going to be like your really basic level. I can do an attack. They can be unarmed and weaponed attacks.
Yes. You can punch someone if you really want, or you can use a spear or a sword or whatever you want.
Yeah, I have a dagger in one hand. And
yeah, you can dual wield. Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, let's touch on that. So the strike action lets you take an attack test. So an attack test is where you are rolling to see if you, and the target that you're rolling for has to be higher than the person's physical defense. Physical defense is made up of a combination of their strength and their speed attributes, and whatever other things that their character might have, depending on their heroic path. You are rolling a d20. At the same time as rolling the d20, you roll all your dice at the same time in this game. So if you'll have a different damage dice depending on the weapon that you're using. A dagger, like you mentioned, has a d4. So you would roll a d4 and the d20 at the same time. And that means that if your d20 plus your relevant stats that you need to add from your character sheet cause you to hit the person, then that damage applies to them and the modifiers that you have for it. So for example, dagger uses the speed attribute. It's a light weapon. It would add your speed to the attack roll and to the damage that's done.
Yeah, perfect. And when you're talking about your D20 is your attack test to see if you are successful or not in hitting your target, and then you're also rolling your damage together. What are you actually testing against with that D20?
It's a physical defense, but there are times certain attacks that can go against other defenses. Your character has cognitive defense and spiritual defense as well, those words will make sense to people that have read Stormlight. Most physical attacks, like weapon attacks, are going to go against their physical defense. There are certain times when you're using other types of attacks in the game, especially when it comes to surge binding, that you're focusing on those other attributes, or the other defenses, but yes, mostly against their physical defense.
Yeah, and for physical, cognitive, and spiritual, they're all on your character sheet. We are going to deep dive into building characters, so don't stress too much about that. We will get into that in future videos. So we've got our D20 for attack tests. We've got our damage die. What happens when we're resolving damage? So there's 4 things that can actually happen when we're resolving damage.
Yeah, so I mean, you can hit. So if you roll high enough, you hit them, and then the damage applies to them. You can roll not high enough, in which case you're not going to do any damage at all. But there is a cool mechanic in this game that we mentioned earlier called graze. So graze is a choice that you have after rolling your attack roll, where you are going to spend a focus to still do some damage. You're going to still graze them with your weapon. Now, it doesn't do the full damage. You don't add your attribute, your extra sort of bonuses to it. It's just the damage die itself. But yeah, really cool way, especially because you could roll a big number on your damage die, but you've missed, and you can maybe the enemy's low and they could be defeated by that one attack. So you can sort of make the choice to spend that extra resource to take him out in the moment, which I think is really cool. And then you can also get a critical hit. Is that the 4th? Is that what we were going for?
So that's the 4th one, which we kind of touched on.
Yeah, so a critical hit now, it doesn't have to be because of a natural 20 on the die, as we mentioned. It could just be that the stakes were raised and you've rolled an opportunity, and the critical hit, like we mentioned before, lets you maximize that damage die. If you've already rolled a maximum on the damage die and you're just attacking one person, hey, you've got those other options that are there as well. So you can take those that we discussed before.
Yeah, so we've got miss, we've got a graze, which is one of my favorite things in the world because I tend to miss a lot. We've got your regular hit and your critical hit. I do want to just also call out that critical hits early on in the game, like you said, sometimes don't feel that great, because if you're only rolling one damage die against one target, and let's say it's a d6 that you're rolling, if you already roll a 6 and you get a nat 20, you can't really do much with that. But if you roll it like further on in the game, when maybe you're targeting multiple multiple targets or rolling with multiple damage die.
If you've got a shard blade, you're going to be rolling multiple damage die, so it's more likely to come into play there.
Yeah, the critical hit is actually quite a bit stronger in later in the game.
Yeah, and I would say critical hits, look, overall they might be certainly slightly less swingy. In games like Dungeons and Dragons, you could roll a 1 on the die and you've hit a critical, so you get to roll another damage die and you roll another 1 and all of a sudden your critical hit's doing almost no damage. So it's going to be more consistent, but not as high highs. You could roll really high by adding extra damage die in the other systems. However, they're going to happen more often because they can really happen fairly often if the razor stakes is happening and the plot die is involved. So.
And like we said, specifically later on in the game, multiple targets, multiple die. That critical hit maximizes all targets for all damage. So every single one of your damage die it gets the max damage, and it does that max damage to all the targets that you're targeting.
That's
so
right.
it does get better the later you play into the game.
For sure.
Two other things I wanted to talk about when we're covering attacks. I want to talk about how ranged and melee attacks work, and then advantage.
Oh yeah, advantage. We mentioned it before. Melee and ranged, pretty standard in this game compared to a lot of games, but just to really quickly summarize, a melee attack, your character essentially just has to be in the square next to the target character, unless you have a weapon that can reach further than that. So a spear, for example, which I guess is a fairly common weapon in the Stormlight Archive, allows you to attack an extra square, but usually you just need to be next to the target. Whereas a ranged attack, you specifically can't be right next to them, or if you are, you actually get disadvantage, sort of just representing the difficulty of trying to fight either with someone next to you when you're attacking someone else, or when you're trying to attack someone that's close to you. But otherwise, you can attack from the distance, whatever distance that weapon sort of allows. So if you've got a weapon that can be thrown, it'll tell you how far, and same with the like a bow and arrow, that sort of thing.
Pretty standard for ranged.
Yeah, there is a funny thing with ranged attacks in this game where you have to be on solid ground, or it has an option, or it sort of mentions solid ground. I think the reasoning for this is that it mentions if you're swimming, or the important one, flying. If you're a wind runner and you're up in the air, you can't just sit up in the air and easily sort of shoot at whoever you want. You're going to have disadvantage in your attacks. You can do it, but it's slightly harder to do, which I think is a good option for balancing. Advantage and disadvantage. So advantage and disadvantage is something that was sort of introduced in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, and in that game, if you're in a situation where you gain advantage, you roll your d20 twice and you can take the higher number. And the opposite would be a disadvantage, where you roll a d20 twice and you take the lower number. In this game, advantage, I think, is cooler. There's a couple of changes to it. So you can, first of all, apply it to any of the die. So we mentioned before that you roll all of your die at the same time. So you could be rolling the d20, a damage die, and a plot die all together. And you can use that advantage to roll an additional one of any of those. So you could choose to roll 2 plot die, or you could choose to roll 2 if you're really confident you're going to hit, but you want to do high damage, you can choose to roll 2 of the damage die and pick the higher one, that sort of thing. And they also stack. You could have double or triple advantage. You could have 2 things giving you advantage and 1 thing giving you disadvantage, and you just work out how many you are. You'd have just a single advantage that's there. But it is cool that you can get sort of double advantage or triple.
Yeah, excellent. And the last point that I'm going to touch on, and this one will be brief because it's something that we are going to dive into, particularly with things like our character sheets. But I wanted to touch on, considering we're talking about combat, your physical stats, and how your physical stats from your character sheet are going to impact your gameplay in combat.
Yeah, there's some... strangely enough, in this game, I think it actually does a really good job of all of your attributes applying to combat really well. Early game, there's some that I'll touch on that are probably more important, but later on in the game, we mentioned before there's 3 different types of defense, and those different defense scores are made up from the different stats or the different attributes that you have. So everything sort of comes into play. And I also mentioned before willpower, which is one of your attributes, affects the recovery die, which is also something that comes up in combat as well. So there is a lot of impact from the stats no matter what. I'd say the main ones are your strength and your speed. So strength, is how hard you can hit with a heavy weapon, but it also determines your health in this game. So your health is 10 plus your strength score, and that is sort of a reason for maybe a character that wouldn't normally ever in other games pick strength to choose some strength, because it's good to have extra health. You then have your speed attribute. Speed is for light weapons, so it determines damage for that and how well you can attack with them. But it also determines how far you can move in a turn. So whether you're a human or a singer has no impact on that. It has to do with your speed attribute, and that obviously multiplies as you use the move action more than once in a turn if you want to as well.
Yeah. So those are all the physical stats and how they impact combat. Like we said, physical, you've also got cognitive and spiritual, so we'll cover those later. That is pretty much in a nutshell our big takeaways on how combat has been brought together for this Cosmere RPG. But I wanted to just give you an opportunity. I have opinions, but I wanted to give you an opportunity before I give my opinion on like what are the big standouts to you that well, I mean, if there's I know that there are good ones because you rave about this Cosmere RPG, but also any challenges or anything that may not work?
I'm a little bit of a Cosmere nerd. Yeah, look, I mean, arguably it's a relatively complicated system, which could be seen as a downside. I think that it is relatively complicated, but it's not too bad. Anyone that's played a TTRPG before should be fine to pick it up. Anyone that is new to this, especially if you've backed the Kickstarter because you love Brandon Sanderson and you've been interested in playing Dungeons and Dragons or whatever it might be, especially if you're a player as well, you don't need to learn every single rule. You'll have your character, so I think that's fine. And I think that even for new GMs that are sort of getting into it, especially if you're going to be watching videos and sort of paying attention and reading the book for yourself, you will, I don't think, have much of a problem. I'd say my key takeaways are probably, I really like the plot die. I think it's great that you can influence what's actually happening in the story a little bit more with that. I think that there are some really great things that will come up as we talk more about it, especially with surge binding and building out your character, and the way that the heroic paths work. You can sort of start in one place and move into other places without it really being that complicated at all, to have a really unique character, which I think is really awesome. Yeah. What about yourself?
I mean, I think I've been pretty transparent. You stole one of mine, the plot die. I love the plot die. I will always love the plot die. I think
always, right.
I think maybe
forever,
if I don't get complications. I really do like the plot die and what it brings. I obviously really like the grazing or grazers as well. Like I said, I tend to miss a little bit, and I think that is a really cool mechanic that any player can have. You can just choose to use focus if you want something cool that you are trying to do to just work. I really love grazers. And I actually really think that the turn order, so the phases, and how we go, like any player can have a fast turn, you just get slightly fewer actions, and then you kind of go through fast turns for the baddies.
Yeah. I think it's a great way to do combat.
It's amazing.
Simple.
I think
it really is easy to
It's really simple.
To.
It gives you more freedom. I think that it's quicker. Than other things like rolling.
I actually might use it in our D&D games. Yeah. We'll see.
I really like the turn order.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing for me though, like overall, is that this TTRPG it's taken a lot of foundational stuff from other games, and it hasn't changed it if it doesn't need to be changed.
Yep.
But it has intentionally changed quite a few things. But I feel...
Yeah, there's nothing that they've sort of changed because...
For the sake of
it,
change,
yeah.
It doesn't feel like they've changed things for the sake of change. It feels like it's been really intentional change to make the game better, and to play into the Cosmere world.
Yeah, so they're clearly...
That's mine.
Yeah, that's fair. They're clearly people that love the Cosmere. They've had Brandon Sanderson involved in some of the writing. Brotherwise Games are the guys that are behind it. They've done some other Stormlight sort of or Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere stuff before, but they've also the design team have been Yeah, the design team have also worked on other TTRPGs before, so they're clearly massive tabletop nerds and clearly massive Cosmere nerds, and I love that.
And it definitely plays out.
There's no unnecessary bloat just in there to try to put a Cosmere skin over some other game. It does have some recognizable mechanics, but everything seems really well thought out and tested.
Yeah. I think that really is going to wrap it up for the video today. I do want to quickly shout out to I hope I say it right, Ryan Ratchford 2530. You probably should do that shout out because it was a comment to you. But for letting us know what you'd like to see coming up next. We haven't necessarily touched on everything that you wanted to see coming up, but we're obviously a pretty new channel, so we appreciate any comments that you guys have, and we're going to try tackle all the content that you guys want to see.
Yeah, I think we were able to touch on a few of the things that he mentioned. We're going to get to the rest of it. But if anyone wants to leave a comment on what they'd like to hear about first, we will be going through the book. But please let us know what you want to hear about, and we will be more than happy to discuss it. Or if you have any good jokes or anything like that, and maybe we can also bring that up at the end of the next episode. So
feel free to like.
We don't do that around here.
No, that felt really terrible.
Yeah, we don't do likes. Do not like the video. You can subscribe though. That works.
That would be helpful.
Yeah, cool.
Okay, done.
I think that is it. Clap it out. You gotta clap it out. That's the work. All right, that'll do. You all right?
No, I'm sweaty.
Do you want to do it recording now?
That's not funny.
Jeez, I had a freak out
That's not
moment.
funny.
Bad memes.